If we could go ahead and close the door. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today for the Senate Education Committee meeting. We are going to start off with a presentation by the Kansas Music Educators Association. So I think we have several people that are there, but is Kelly there with us?
Kelly, well, actually, he's actually at the House Education Committee meeting right now.
Okay. So who is going to lead us off with regard to the presentation?
Well, I'll go ahead and start off. I'm John Taylor. I live in Wichita, and I'm the executive director for the Kansas Music Educators Association. Our president, Mark Gard, is planning on being on, and he'll probably join us at any moment. We just came out of a meeting with Senator Dole. We when he comes on, I'll let him take over. But I'll just take a moment to introduce. We'll have three members here today. Three of our other members are over in the House Education Committee meeting, and I'll let them introduce themselves as they come on. As I mentioned, I live in Wichita, and I'm recently retired as professor of music education at Friends University. I'm sure most of you are familiar with KMEA, the Kansas Music Educators Association. We are an organization that represents about 2,000 member teachers here in the state and the students that they serve, which is an extremely large body of students who are studying music all over the state. Kansas music educators, every state has a music educator association. We're all under the umbrella of the what's called NAFME, the National Association for Music Education. And even though Kansas tends to be in the mid 30s in terms of state population, we have the 10th largest MEA in our state, in the country. So we're very, I think it's a tribute to the work that's been done at the legislature, but also among our teachers and in our schools to support music in Kansas as we have gone through these years. We just finished recently, well, normally we'd be there in person, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but of course the world is virtual now, so we'll have a virtual meeting today. It's our hope to be back there next year. And actually, we received a grant from the from the Country Music Foundation to increase our activity on the Hill in Topeka, and we'll be doing some additional things next year. But normally we're there in March for Music in Our School Month, federally, as well as we have a proclamation from the governor that declares March Music in Our Schools Month in Kansas as well. And normally we're there in person, and we like to feed legislators, but especially staff and aides and those kind of people breakfast, and then bring some music into the rotunda, which is always great fun. So we'll look forward to being with you next year. One of the largest events that we do every year is our in-service workshop, which is our state convention, which is held in Wichita every year. It's the largest convention held in Wichita each year. Draws about 6,000 to 10,000 people from all over the state. Normally that's in Wichita in person. This year we did it virtually about a week ago, and had a great registration. Presented 103 clinic sessions for professional development for teachers, as well as a series of concerts from selected groups around the state. And we had exhibitors who supported our conference. We have a very large exhibit hall. And this year they used virtual chat rooms to talk with our members as they attended the convention. That was very effective. And then a very unique thing, again, music teachers have been using technology for a long time, but we did have our all-state ensembles. We have 8 all-state bands, choirs, and orchestras. And students audition from all over the state to get into those. They have to go through a series of auditions. And those students rehearsed virtually on Zoom chats. And although that's not the best way for us to meet our students, it was unique in that we could bring composers and musicians and conductors from all over the world in to chat with them. For example, in our jazz room, Wynton Marsalis was there to talk with the kids. So it's a great experience for all of our music educators and our students from around the state. And then each student recorded their music. They rehearsed online with the conductor, and then they recorded their music individually, and those were submitted, and then we hired a music technician to stream those together into a virtual performance, and those were aired about this past Saturday and Sunday to the students and their teachers and their parents. A great opportunity. I see that Mark Gard is here, so I'll turn that over to him for a minute. Mr. Gard?
John, do we have Mr. Guard with us?
Yes, you do.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, sorry I'm late. Normally our school system uses Zoom, so this is my first time on WebEx. And all the technology that we're using. I know Dr. Taylor did talk about the ISW, and it was a very successful event. I don't know exactly off of that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. I'll be back and talk about a couple other things, but I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Jamie Miniman, who's going to be talking about our mentoring network.
Mark. Yes, my name is Jamie Miniman, and I currently teach in Marysville, Kansas, 5 through 12 instrumental music. At KMEA, we are very proud of our mentoring program. We have 3 outstanding co-state chairs that work together along with our 7 district chairs to work to make connections with experienced mentors and beginning music educators. And those teachers are able to engage in professional learning through mentoring events and online discussions. And our mentees enjoy support and encouragement from a community of professionals who are committed to their success. This year, our mentoring program was able to hold virtual district meetings, Zoom hangouts, a mentoring conference, and then they had mini sessions at the in-service workshop that Mr. Guard referred to. They also have an ongoing newsletter called the Mentoring Minute, which is very helpful to our new teachers and keeping them up to date on the latest information. In addition to that, our KMEA has 30 current chapters of TRIM, which is an NAFME program that recognizes our outstanding music students in our grades 6 through 12 throughout the state. And these members are selected based on their academic and musical achievement, as well as strength of character. And these students increase our school and community involvement through community service activities and music enrichment events. And we're very proud to honor these students in an honor society type of way. And then we also have at our collegiate level 26 chapters currently in Kansas, which services approximately 2,700 students at the college level. So we're working on those pre-service teachers as well to create a sense of community and guidance for them as future music educators, and also to provide networking and professional development for them to keep students excited and motivated to go into the real world to teach. This last September, they had their first collegiate development workshop and virtually, and actually had the highest attendance at 155. So they're very proud of that, even though it was virtual, to still have so many participants. And they're hoping that by being involved in NAFME Collegiate, that students are more likely to stay involved in KMEA after graduation, and also to keep those graduates in Kansas teaching. And I will pass it back over to Dr. Taylor to give you some more information about funding. Thank you.
So probably the closest we're going to come today to having asks is to talk a little bit about funding for our schools, and specifically for music in our schools. We're meeting throughout the day. We're meeting with some legislators there in Topeka, but we're also meeting with our legislators in Washington, D.C. We normally meet with you in March and with them in June face to face, but of course that's happening this year. Secondary Education Act, the SEA, which has been around for decades, is something that we track in KMEA very carefully, and especially its current version, which is ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. And we're pleased that for several years now, music is listed as a well-rounded subject, which is, again, in your committee work, I'm sure you're aware, is the federal language now for what used to be core subjects. So music is a well-rounded subject, putting it on an equal level with science and mathematics and language arts and those kinds of things. That's going to be really important right now, because as we work through the end of this school year, but hoping in all of our hopes that we'll start what might be look like a normal school year this next fall, the funding is going to be very important in the schools for us to be able to try to reinstate music classes that right now don't look like normal music classes in the state of Kansas. We really appreciate the fact that in Kansas, that money comes from the federal government, goes through our legislature, and is distributed to our school districts for local control and decision of how those dollars will be used. That allows our music teachers to access through their school boards and administrations that funding. So we would ask that you just continue to keep that funding through, but there will probably be some new funding coming through. Some may come through you and some may come through the KSDE, the federal funding. There will be some money coming through, we anticipate, that will be for startup of schools. And we want to make sure we can get that into the hands of teachers out in the schools as quickly as possible so that we can get a normal school year started again. Many of our school districts have been having regular school, and in other areas of our state, where I live here in Wichita, middle school and high school students classes until this after the 1st of January. So things have looked very different, and our music classes have looked very different. You've been seeing the mitigation that's being used in the schools, masks, still social distancing. Those actually came from studies that were done by music education organizations. Actually started last, and we've been sharing that information liberally with our schools, and of course that's now the standard mitigation. We're very excited to announce that because our music teachers have access to that information, there's not been one reported case of an outbreak that comes from a music classroom in the state of Kansas, the coronavirus. And so have been working very hard with that. But again, music doesn't look like normal music looks right now. And we will need some of those federal funds as well as state funds to be able to move forward in the future. We also we're concerned, I'm hearing some good reports, but we're concerned about data. We see that state legislatures may have less money for the next year or two to spend due to tax collection processes during the COVID time. And so we just want to, hopefully with money that the state legislature will be able to provide, which of course is under court order right now, as well as money that comes from the federal government, that we'll be able to teachers in the schools, and especially music teachers in the schools. One of the reasons we're here today is because nationally, it's Music in Our Schools Month. That's one of the reasons why we always come up to see you folks every March. And we're also pleased that the governor signed a proclamation that makes it Music in Our School Month here in Kansas as well. And so we're celebrating all of that and hope to come out of that celebration with renewed and a good school year, a normal school year started. The climax of Music in Our School Month in March is what's called the world's largest concert. This is a concert that's actually hosted at the Disney complex in Florida, and materials are provided country. We have many teachers who participate here in Kansas. And for 30 minutes, students make music all across the country at exactly the same time on the same songs. It's a wonderful celebration of what we do in the schools. Then finally, I'll mention we have a very large advocacy effort in the state of Kansas. You might want to be aware of that. Website called AdvoAngle, www.advoangle.com. That is the KMEA advocacy website. And again, I mentioned we've gotten some grants from the Country Music Association Foundation. The first grant we got 2 years ago was to be able to build that site up with statements from students and parents and teachers, and also data about the value of having music in the lives of Kansas students. And so you're certainly welcome to take a look at that site. There's some great information there. Our advocacy effort is led by Kelly Nedler, who you mentioned earlier is our Advocacy and Government Relations Chair for Kansas Music Educators. And then we have the state divided into 7 districts, and we have an advocacy chair in each of our 7 districts who also works on that process. So I'll turn it back over to Mark Gard.
I keep forgetting to unmute. One of the initiatives that we are starting this year is a small schools sort of project. We are working diligently as an organization to promote or to ensure success for smaller communities and to promote those teachers, or really to encourage those teachers that are working in smaller and more rural areas, more remote areas. One of the things that we will be starting with KMEA this year is going to be the 1-2A honor band. That's going to be one of our new ensembles that's going to be performing at our in-service workshop in February in Wichita. So next year we'll be instituting that group, which we hope will continue to develop and evolve. But it's giving those students that are maybe in those smaller 1 and 2A schools a chance to have that experience that they might not have otherwise. So that's one of our new initiatives. Another thing that we're sort of looking at for the next 2 years is sort of talking about the school redesign process. One of the reasons for that is because we're getting some concerns from some of our constituents that there's a concern that the electives are sort of possibly getting moved to the side a little bit. That's been sort of evident with the whole COVID situation that, well, there's some schools, again, that have met. They've met remotely, but what they're doing is they're not meeting with their elective classes. They're just meeting with the science, math, social studies, history, English. They're more doing the remote classes with just those, but the electives are not meeting as maybe frequently or if at all. One of our officers in the past, this past year, she was not teaching a specific music class. She was assisting one of the math teachers. So we are looking at, again, just thinking in terms of where are the electives heading. With the school reopening, we just really hope that, the electives, music included in that, are still going to be very much encouraged, supported. We had meetings earlier this morning, and Kelly Nedler, who's out there in Dodge City, he was talking about 2 schools in Western Kansas that are looking at consolidating 2 positions into 1 position so that one person would be doing K through 12 for both of those schools. So again, we're looking at encouraging those teachers that are out there in remote situations in Western Kansas. So that's part of the mentoring program that we're doing, but that's also maybe a part of the small schools initiative. But then also we sort of draw that into the school redesign as well, because once again, what we are noticing a little bit with some of the school redesign, and we are aware that each district is sort of responsible for developing their own program, but there is a lot of emphasis on individual student programs or project. And we do feel that, music programs are where those are all around developing. The students learn the collaboration, they learn the teamwork. We touch on all sorts of different subjects. We're physical, we have the math involved with it as far as the reading the music. We work with foreign languages, we work with actually language. One of my groups, I teach vocal music. One of my groups is doing a piece that involves William Shakespeare. It's using one of his texts. So we are developing that well-rounded individual, which then goes back to the Every Student Succeeds Act, part of a well-rounded education. This is just an anecdote, but our keynote speaker at the last ISW in February was Dr. Tim Lautzenheiser, and he does a lot with music education, but also just motivational type speaking. And he was working with a group of just high school administrators. This wasn't even in Kansas, but with all of this COVID and how do we restart, how do we reopen, he was talking with this group of high school administrators. And the question came up, okay, where do the students seem to be most engaged? And overwhelmingly, from administrators who maybe did not have that much background in music, they said, oh, well, it's in the music classes. So we do know that there are some students who specifically come to school for the electives, for the music classes, because that's where their friends are. That's where they get that social emotional connection, which they might not do in some of their other classes. So we just feel like, that's an area that we need to be particularly concerned about. And again, with school redesign, in some ways it's a very good process, but there's also some concern within our constituency that there's maybe a tendency to focus less on the electives. And that's just one thing that we are interested in maybe pursuing, talking about more in the next couple of years. That's all that I have down on my agenda. Now, what questions do you have for us, or what do you want to know from us?
Well, I want to first of all thank you for participating in our Senate Education Committee meeting. We do have a hearing that's starting up just as soon as we're done talking here, and it's to have an overview on the foster care report card. There were a couple of things that I heard, and I do want to address them. One of them was a statement that please make sure that the funding gets in the hands of teachers. And so as chair of Senate Education and having served as a senator for, this is my 7th year, I just want to reiterate that that funding goes to your school district, and that is the responsibility, it really is the responsibility of your school board and your building principals to make sure that that funding gets into the hands of teachers. I will tell you that that is a recurring issue that is addressed here at least in Senate Education Committee meetings. I know next week we have counselors, social workers, and school psychologists, and guess what? They have told us every year for the last 6 years that I've been on this committee, they have said, could you please do something about giving us pay raises? So getting pay raises and getting funding to teachers in the classroom, that is a decision made by your superintendent in the recommendation for budgeting, and it's codified by your school board. So your frustration actually is our frustration. We know that more than 55% of the state general fund budget is going to K through 12 education. In fact, just yesterday, Jim Porter, who is the chair of the State Board of Education, said, you know what, any concerns about funding during COVID and things that haven't occurred during COVID, funding is not the issue. They know that by the end of this school year, more than or just shy of $1 billion will be coming in from the federal government to address issues of COVID. So to hear from our music educators that we have school districts where electives are not being taught, where a music teacher is not teaching but is getting paid to be a teacher, but is instead assisting a math teacher, that is not what full funding of school education is supposed to be about. Every year for the last 4 years, year upon year, more funding is going to our K through 12 school districts than the year prior. Every single year, there has been an increase, and yet what we hear from teachers is, when are schools going to be fully funded? You know, 2 years ago, the Kansas Supreme Court said, this funding formula meets our standard. Now, there are many that disagree with regard to should it have been that high, but it was what has been in the budget last year, this year. It's scheduled to be in the budget next year. So please understand, it is horrifying to hear from you that we have school districts where teachers are not teaching their discipline area, because that is exactly what that funding, that is what the nearly $1 billion of additional funding from the federal government, that's what that's supposed to be about. So it is particularly frustrating. I will tell you that it has always been the hope that what happens with regard to the fine arts is what is the STEAM, puts the STEAM in STEM. But what you're telling us is that the STEAM isn't there consistently throughout the state in our public school districts. So please know your concern is our concern, and I would welcome the music educators in our state that have not been allowed to be teaching the music courses. Please direct it to my office. Cindy is our committee assistant. Get it to my office because we want to know. We want you to name names, because we understand as teachers there's so much that you can do. Not all school districts even negotiate on an annual basis, but we can do very little to help you in doing what you want to do, and that's help our kids, educate our kids if we don't know what's not going on. And I appreciate that you shared candid concerns with the Senate Education Committee, and we are not going to let this drop, so please get that information to us. We will continue to push the message, and I think you can understand why there is significant frustration from a legislative standpoint, because we've been assured time in and time out, we need this funding so that we can have teachers do what needs to be done in the classroom. So it's very frustrating to continue to hear a different message, that the funding isn't in the hands of teachers, and that we have teachers that have not been allowed to educate kids for those elective courses. That says to me, they're not getting a full array of offering for courses at the middle and high school level. I can't do much about a school district that's going to take 2 music teachers down to 1. I'm not sure what the additional story is on that. But having had a strings instructor that taught not only elementary but middle and high school, it was junior high back in the day, I understand that frustration of them constantly being on the road and trying to provide those services, and that was in Johnson County. So it doesn't matter what the county is. We know that there are issues today, but there are issues that you addressed even in the past. I have a statement from Senator Straub. Sorry, I was going to call you something different. Sorry. I was going to call you Senator OShea, but Senator Straub has a comment, and then we're going to, I do apologize, but we are going to have to move on to the foster care report card. So Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You can call me Senator OShea anytime.
Okay.
That's a compliment. This question is for Mark. I'm sorry if I wasn't listening close enough, but what has been your involvement with virtual schools? I just know as a public virtual school parent that years ago, probably 12 years ago, we had a very robust curriculum with the K-12 curriculum that offered both art and music. And this year, we were not offered that curriculum. It's not even presented as an option. They offer music or a language kind of in a club format. So being a parent and so pro-education, I know how important fine arts are to our children. And so I would ask, what has been your involvement with virtual schools and ensuring that the curriculum is just at least made available?
Okay. Now, again, every school is doing their own different thing. In Coffeyville, we have 3 different things that students can be involved with. They can be there in person, and we are just doing 4 days a week. In fact, today, Wednesday, is a remote day for my students. So it's a day, we're 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on. So we're doing that sort of a hybrid thing, but those are in-person students. We have students that can choose to be remote, and our school system uses Zoom and Google Classroom. So we're trying to do as much as possible with those 2 platforms. It's impossible really to do a rehearsal through Zoom because you can't do everything simultaneously. There's always this lag. So we try to encourage, I mean, there's some teachers who are using FlipSnack. It's where the students can record themselves and submit it. And so we can at least hear what they're doing, what they're capable of doing, but it's just not that same teamwork. It's not being collaborative. So that's one of our probably biggest frustrations. We're still trying to work with our students on performing skills, but unless we really have them there in person, it's really difficult to get that done. I know that we have some some people locally who are trying to do private lessons, but also doing that remotely does not necessarily work too well. It's just not like physically being able to be there and giving them the instructions in person. But then we also have virtual students, but those are ones that are not in our programs because they're not offering like music classes virtually. If they're remote, yes, they can be in part of our program. I do have some students that come in during the day. They're doing most of their classes online or through the Google Classroom platform or through Zoom meetings, but they can choose to come in person to my class, and I do appreciate those students that are doing that. But if the students have gone strictly virtual, then those are the students that are not in my classroom. So did that pretty much answer what you wanted to know, or?
Yeah, that answers my question. So just a follow-up comment. So being a public virtual parent or private homeschool parent for the last 14 years, I'm just saying that we used to be offered curriculum. It was a music curriculum provided by K-12, K-12 Incorporated, and it's actually fairly rigorous. Teaches children's music staff and teaches them the different notes, and there's often a CD sing-along, and they would incorporate songs from, say, their history class that they would sing in their music class to go along with whatever they were learning in history. Just really a great curriculum, but I'm not even seeing that curriculum offered in our public schools anymore. So I don't know what your relationship with actual full-time or virtual schools is, but that would be a complaint as a parent. I want at least the opportunity to be there, the curriculum to be provided, and then what the child and their parents do with it is up to them. But I have seen a dumbing down of our kids and fewer course offerings than we had just 10 years ago.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I am going to have to cut us off. But I just want to say to John and to Mark and to Jamie, thank you so much for your leadership in the fine arts. We miss having you and your students performing in the Capitol, but we know that will come probably, hopefully next year. But continue to work to get the STEAM in education and in STEM. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Senators.
Thank you.
At this time, we are going to start on our briefing on the foster care report card. And do we have Craig and Kathy and Tanya? Are you all on virtual with us? Okay.
Yes, hi, Tanya.
Okay. I don't think that we're going to have enough time to hear from everyone today. Is there anyone from the group of 3 of you that can present at the start of our meeting tomorrow? We see Tanya. So Tanya, Craig, or Kathy, can either one of you present tomorrow at the start of our meeting?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
This is Craig. I would be available tomorrow.
Okay.
Yes, I
Then
am.
Craig, let's go ahead and have you present tomorrow, and let's just go ahead and start. So Tanya, since we can see you, let's go ahead and have you start, and then we'll go to Kathy. And Craig, we will have you present tomorrow.
Thank you, Chair Baumgartner and committee. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thanks for the opportunity to present information on the foster care report card. This annual education report card. This is the first one, and it's been a tremendous opportunity for the Department for Children and Families to learn a little bit more about outcomes in education, continuity of education. We have a lot more to learn, but this really helps us see outcome information in a way that we haven't been able to see before. So we want to start by thanking Department of Education for this wonderful tool. Ensuring educational stability and those educational outcomes is a priority for the agency. And this report will help us advance that work. So again, we appreciate that. The 2019 and 2020 report does reflect differences in outcomes, achievements. So again, we know there is work ahead. We're just beginning to understand the components of this. And what we have discovered is that on the website, the Department of Education, there's an ability to drill down or to create reports at the district level. So we are really looking forward to learning more this spring and summer beyond the statewide information. So we look forward to that, these data sets. I put in our report a few points or a few bullets that you have in front of you on just some initial insights that we have from this report. And I know my colleague tomorrow will be able to explain to you some of the broader aspects of the component of this report. But just some initial observations at the statewide is that we can tell from this report that the percentage of students experiencing foster care who graduate with a diploma in the 4 years is about 28 points lower when you compare that to all Kansas students. So for us, we need to learn more about why that is, but it's good to know that that is the difference that we're looking at so we can begin those dialogues. A couple of other points, we're able to look at the math assessments. We also know that there are more students experiencing foster care. 50% of those are testing at that level 1, which is categorized as the limited abilities for post-secondary readiness, compared to a rate or a percentage of 28% for all students. So again, it gives us that statewide snapshot. We're looking forward to drilling down into what does that really mean. We did notice that at the level 2 area, which is the basic ability for readiness for post-secondary, that there is less of a gap between those experiencing foster care and all students. I don't know yet what that really means, but it is interesting that level 2 assessment has a closer proximity or a more narrow gap than the other levels. So we look forward to that. I was kind of excited. I grew up in Olathe, so I went in and looked at, I was able to on their website look at the foster care subgroup for Olathe 233 and was able to see that similar to the statewide performance, those who are experiencing foster care in the Olathe district are having lower math assessment level 1 than all students. So some of those parallels are there. We understand Kansas is first among states to have this type of report, and we want to take advantage of it. I think the Department for Children and Families also knows that some of our practices in our support of the foster care population or subgroup in this report and their families is really important. We want to create placement stability. We know that we need to make sure that school records are transferred timely within 3 days when we're unable to keep a child in the same school when they enter foster care. We're going to continue our monthly work with the work group that happens. And I think with this data, there's really potential to advance those dialogues locally for districts to talk about what does this mean, in terms, especially the assessment scores. We are improving our placement stability. We're pleased about that. More work ahead. And we also track a few other data indicators that I think will help provide context to this. For example, we know the percentage of children experiencing foster care who are able to stay in the same school, which is helpful context. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to present information on the foster care report from the department's perspective. We have a lot to learn. We're looking forward to the spring and summer and continued dialogue at a state level, as well as drilling down into some school districts. Happy to provide any stand for any you guys needed at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Very much, Tanya. Next up, we have Kathy Grossenbacher, Director of Information Technology, Kansas State Department of Education. Kathy, are you with us?
I am with you today. Thank you so much
Wonderful.
for having us. I think Craig is going to jump in, and I will sit back and answer any data questions that you might have.
Okay, well, I think Craig is presenting tomorrow.
Okay.
So I guess,
Madam
okay.
Chair,
Yep.
I apologize. Kathy and I were here as a team today. I was here to give you an overview of the report card. Kathy's our Director of Information Technology, so if questions came up about more details on the data, I was going to need her to answer those.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I think that we will just wait for those for tomorrow. So committee, are there any questions for Tanya Keys, Deputy Secretary, Department of Children and Families? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tanya, I was just wondering, as with this report card on foster care, is there a baseline at all of information on the student that can be at the start-off point as they have moved into the foster care system?
I don't know that I know the answer to that. In aggregate, this is the first report of its kind. Certainly at an individual level, if we wanted to have communication, that I don't know if those assessment score levels are available or how they might be available through the years for a caregiver to be able to compare. This is our first statewide baseline for those assessments and the other indicators such as the graduation pieces. So I apologize, I don't know that answer.
Senator Petty, follow.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, I know that, you know, this is a population that has a lot of ACEs scores and has a lot of trauma in their background. And so I think it's, as we, this being the first year, and as we use this report card as an informational piece on looking at our foster care system, and I think it can provide us some critical data, but at the same time, I'm cautious about how we can look at this population when it comes to, for example, high school graduation rates and expecting something dramatic when it is a population that has a lot of issues. And so I hope that that DCF will be looking at that as well as they're looking at the information that you're gathering through this report card.
Yes, thank you. There are a lot
Thank you.
of factors to consider and to learn.
Committee, other questions? Could you share with us, so you will be tracking that transfer of records and tracking how long it's taking, the number of days when a child is moved from home and homeschool to a different school? Are you going to be tracking how effective you are at getting that done within 3 days?
Yes, our foster care grantee case management agencies, through their action plans, are tracking that, and then ultimately that we would be able to aggregate that. It will be turned into central administration, but the day-to-day tracking will occur by the foster care grantee case management agencies.
That's wonderful. I also notice in the report, we indicate that there's no data available for suspensions or expulsions. So is that something that DCF is working out with the Department of Education as far as how to track that?
I don't have information or updates on the dialogue with those two indicators, the statewide worker, but we can get that information back for the committee.
Okay, I just noticed, that was one of the things that was to be reported. We know that no data is available. I just didn't know if there were conversations to determine, okay, how are we going to start collecting that data, because we're going to need a report card next year. Committee, are there any additional
Yes, I
questions?
understand.
Okay. Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 4 of your testimony, I'm trying to understand what is level 2, 3, 4 when we're looking at this data on math, language arts, and science scores.
And that may be a Kathy answer.
Oh, a Kathy, okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the performance levels are the levels of performance on our state assessment. A student can perform at levels 1, 2, 3, or 4 based upon cut scores that are set for each one of our assessments, whether it's English language arts, mathematics, or science. So performance level 1 being the lowest level that a student can perform in, and level 4 being the highest.
So if I may, Madam Chair, on the left, let's take, for example, the very first category. We've got a number, and I'm assuming that's the actual number of students who took this test. And then the percentage would be the percentage of students, of total students, or is this the percentage on the assessment?
That's the number of foster care students, like in the first one, all foster care students. That is the number of all foster care students who scored at level 1, level 2, level 3, or level 4.
Mm-hmm. And then the percentage, like 51.25 in the first blue box, that would be the percentage of total students that performed at that level? Well, I'm sorry, total foster students.
Yes, that would
Okay.
be correct.
All right, thank you for explaining that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think one of the questions that I know that we'll want to address tomorrow is with regard to let me see. On page 3, I know one thing that we want to get clarified is that promoted to the next grade level. And so I think that we're going to go ahead and stop here. And so Craig and Kathy, I appreciate your willingness to present for us tomorrow. Tanya, thank you so much for being with us and answering our questions today. So committee, we will carry this on tomorrow. We'll start with this and then we'll move into our 2 House bill hearings. So thank you so much for those that were here to share with us on the briefing for foster care and committee. Our meeting is adjourned.